All right, turbo guys, this is it. We're gonna do intercooled versus water meth injection. This is Engine Masters. I'm David Freiberger, and I got to tell you, I am very fortunate to work with one of the most beloved guys in the whole industry, super knowledgeable, awesome dyno tuner. But unfortunately, Steve Brule is not going to be able to be here for the next few episodes. So, great. Mr. Richard Holdner.
Nice. Hello, everybody. There's no way that I can take the place of a Steve Brule, obviously, but I'll come here and help any way I can.
And you did a lot. He's going to run the dyno over the next few episodes, and he basically put together this whole package of like hardware here that's going to make a whole bunch of power and show us what this episode is all about, which is intercooling. Are we going to do a air-to-water intercooler, or would you prefer to have water meth injection? That's what we're gonna find out.
That's gonna be a good comparison.
So this is my motor, but you know more about it than I do. Tell me what we did here.
All right, we got a typical 5.3 LM7, you know, an iron block truck motor, basically. This thing has forged internals. We have trick flow 205 heads. We've got a Brian Tooley stage 2 cam.
I think it's a 2. You think it's a 3.
Yeah, you know? Either way.
Take your pick.
We have got a Borg Warner S480 billet wheel turbo supplying all the boost that we need, and we got this Holley-like turbo system with the cast manifolds.
Right.
So the combination's capable of supplying way more power than we need for the test, but it will work perfectly for what we're doing.
And what we're doing is trying to aim this at a guy who maybe is probably his first turbo LS package. He's putting it in a car. He knows he's got to have charge cooling.
Yeah.
Because when you compress air to make boost, to make power, you make heat.
That's right.
And heat makes stuff blow up real bad. And so you really, really, really want charge cooling. And the option is going to be either an intercooler or water meth injection. That's and right. For a guy at this level, which is, I forget what this makes, 700, 800, something like that.
Yep.
Do you want to go through all the plumbing of an intercooler, or can you live with just having the water meth injection? That's what this is going to be all about.
That's right. There's pros and cons of both. You got to look at it all, right?
We're going to roll this on the dyno, hook it up, fire it up, and then hope that Richard doesn't blow it up over the course of the episode.
I'm not making any promises.
That's be your fault either way.
Okay, we've got our 5.3 turbo motor up on the dyno. We're going to test the intercooler versus water meth, but one of the important data points we need to get is right here. We're going to take a charge temperature measurement in the intake manifold after the turbo and after the intercooler, and also after the water methanol injection, after we install it.
So we're 100% set, right?
I think we're ready to go.
Ready for turbo action?
That's right. Motor's up on the dyno, got the intercooler on. We just got to start it up and run it, I guess, right?
Pretty much. See, this is another deal. Like, we always have this with Brule, where he pre-tests everything, and you've pre-tested this, so you know the answers, and we have no idea. So
I'm not going to tell you a damn thing.
You're going to look like a genius.
Yeah. Wait, I think it's going to, and I can just tell you, right?
Nice. Yeah, exactly. No, fire it up. Let's put some heat in the manifolds and
let's get going.
See what it's going to do. Can you believe that's just standard cruising model? Everybody has one LS power these days?
Yeah, that was super easy.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, isn't it?
At least from here.
So we made 729 horsepower at 6,800 RPM and 637.5 pound-feet at 5,500. And the boost curve, call that 14 pounds of boost at 6,800 RPM.
Yep.
So how about our manifold air temp?
The temperature in the plenum, we're measuring it right like after the throttle body, starting about 70 degrees and finishing it up at a peak of 86 degrees.
So that's really all we got. Now the next thing we have to do is just tear the intercooler off and do it with meth and see what the same answers are.
Yep. Meth? You're really going to hit it with some meth?
Yeah. Well, and if this was a lab, then it would be a meth lab, right?
Well, it's sort of a laboratory.
Yeah.
How come this is too easy? This is all we need to know?
Yeah. Do you want me to make it harder to try to go out and break something?
Yes.
Disconnect one of the rockers or
Add some drama.
I mean, it would be all roadkill if we did that then, right?
All right, let's go rip it apart.
All right.
Make it better.
Okay, now it's as simple as removing the intercooler and installing, I guess, just a straight tube and water meth injection,
Yeah,
right?
we're gonna use this same tube. As a matter of fact, we already got our holes drilled for both water meth. We gotta clock this, so dosage is gonna get on that, spin that baby around. It's all good.
You want me to take like dino water off and pour it all over the floor?
No, we're gonna try not to do that.
Okay.
Because even though Brulee's not here, he would still be yelling at me.
He would know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of guys these days, they don't want to run the intercooler in pro drags and stuff. They're just running methanol. They're throwing the intercooler away entirely.
There's a lot of guys that don't have, I mean, sometimes this is a packaging problem, whether it's an air-to-air, air-to-water. Guys just can't fit it in there, especially like in a late model deal. You might not be able to fit that. So they can run, you know, water meth. It fits in there easy. It's easy to install. It's adjustable. Kind of cool.
Our intercooler is gone. Now we're gonna find out if we can replace it with water meth injection, which takes a liquid like this, the Snow Performance Boost Juice, and sprays it into the discharge track to pull heat out of the air from the latent heat of vaporization of this mixture. So the way this works is, first of all, we have a pump like this one right here that you're gonna have to mount in your car somewhere. And it is pumping fluid out of a little tank like this. You've also got a controller, which is on this gauge right here. And what it does is it tells the system at what point of boost you want to start pumping and at what point you want to have 100% of that pump going. So in this case, we've got it just starting to flow a little bit of fluid at 5 PSI, and it's all in at 13 PSI. Now, what it's doing is it's taking that water and methanol mixture, and it is feeding it through this red line into a couple of injectors in our discharge tube just before the intake manifold. Now, there's a lot of math to figure out what size these injectors should be. You can see that in the Snow Performance instructions. In this case, we've got a 1 and a 6 adding up to what we hope is going to be the right mixture here. Richard's actually pre-tuned all this, so we know that he's got it right. But that is something you need to deal with, is the injector size and that ramp rate on how the pump works. The question is, for all this complexity and stuff, is it actually simpler than an intercooler and a water tank and all that other kind of stuff? And is it going to make as much power? Well, that's what we're about to go find out. You've got this thing pre-tuned. So what's your tune-up experience on when you add meth injection? Do you need to take fuel out of your tables in order to?
Yeah, because the water meth system obviously is going to add fuel. So we're going to see that on the air fuel mixture. So it's definitely going to change that. So we'll have to, basically we've made the base tune leaner, and the water meth is now going to supplement that and add more fuel.
So it's supplementing it by like a ratio, half a ratio?
Yeah, by like a ratio or a ratio and a half. It's quite a bit. So if you don't have that system on and I try to make a run, we will definitely notice
it's going to be too lean.
Yeah, it'll be too lean.
And conversely, if some guy slaps this on his car without changing his tune-up, it's going to be way too rich.
Right. Yeah, which is obviously a little safer to be that way, right? I mean, you want it to be safe, and then the guy would have to start, you know, it's better to start safe and then dial back than the other way around.
You don't have to worry about that with an intercooler. It's always going to be working for you.
It's always there.
You're ready to fire it up and find out what this does to power.
Let's see what it does.
Okay.
I want to know.
Inquiring minds and Dulcich.
Thanks, Richie.
Look at that, 720 horsepower. Not bad. We only dropped 9.
That's not bad.
But look at the pound-feet. 582 pound-feet, down from 637.
That's a big change.
What is with that?
Do you want to see a comparison?
Yeah, overlay it.
What the heck is going on there?
It really only matched the power right up top. Everywhere else, there's a giant gap. So the question is, why? Is it boost? Is it temperature?
Should we look at temperature?
Let's look at temperature.
Okay.
So now we're gonna look at the data from inside the intake manifold to see what the temperature was with the intercooler versus the meth injection. And
pretty close.
Just about the same.
There's almost no difference there.
The red line is the intercooler, which actually is just a little bit hotter at a couple points than the meth injection.
It's water meth doing its job there, yo.
So that doesn't explain why the power is so radically different. So boost.
In that area where there's a big difference, they're the same, yeah.
The meth injection shows higher boost up here at the peak, and that's because we knew that was going to happen basically. When you take the intercooler out of the equation, you're removing a boost restriction, and so boost is going to go up,
so
especially at high airflow demand.
That's right.
but that is not explaining a difference of, what did you say, it was like 60 pound-feet
Yeah, it's a ton.
in the middle? So how come meth doesn't make power?
If the air fuel is the same and the temperature is the same and the timing is the same, what's going on?
That manifold was never designed to flow a single droplet.
No.
It is meant for dry air.
And it's flowing a lot of droplets right now.
And exactly, you're flooding that thing, and who knows if it's all hitting the front two cylinders or what.
Yeah.
All you really know is that you've got your temperature drop right there behind the throttle body.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on cylinder to cylinder. Have you ever done it on like a single plane or a tunnel ram?
Not that I can remember. I don't think so, but I think it probably would be a better idea.
Okay, intercooler 1, meth injection. Not
Well,
so
yeah,
good.
but I think this is another one of those cases where testing has shown us that we don't know what we don't know. It raises more questions than it's answered. The short version is, if you're a typical guy with an LS intake manifold, you're better off with an intercooler than you are with a meth injection.
Yeah.
You know, for area under the curve, that's actually an enormous difference.
Yeah. I think what we need to do now is if we can run this without an intercooler and without water meth and find out how much both of them are doing better than not having anything at all.
Oh yeah,
that might show us something.
You want to show people the disaster?
I think that if we show them what what a lot of guys are out there doing wrong, then we can go, here, you can get this much better or you can get this much better.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we're now going to pull it with no charge cooling whatsoever, and hopefully I've got a motor left when we're done. We do have Rocket brand good gas in this thing, so we don't
Even if
detonate.
he has most of the motor, that's still fine, right?
A little bit of the motor.
Yeah,
Better
yeah.
than none.
Right, now we're entering the danger zone, stuff you should never do with parts that you know and love from your own pocketbook. We're going to run with no charge cooling whatsoever.
Running without a safety net, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Have you done this before and blown stuff up?
Only on your motor.
Way hotter in the plenum.
It
You
sure
see
is.
that?
Yep.
650 horsepower, way down,
Yeah.
and 586 pound-feet of torque,
Well,
which
we're
is
up a couple
just
pounds.
actually
Uh-oh.
slightly better than with the meth
Yeah.
injection. That doesn't make sense.
Oh, look at that.
Oh,
That's
weird.
weird.
So what we're looking at here is black is no charge cooling whatsoever. It's what we just did. No methanol injection, no intercooler. And red is with water meth injection. So there's like a big spike in power towards the end, and that's got to be boost related if we look at the boost curve.
Yeah.
But what's freaking me out is that all throughout the power curve, it's not that different.
No, how similar there. And actually, it's down a little bit from the, oh no, the water meth is up just a little bit from the no water meth. Okay,
yeah, the
from
water
the curve.
a little bit better, but not as much better as I expected with those charge temps.
So should we look at the charge temperature now?
Yeah, look at
okay.
Our concern here is that the curves aren't as radically different as we expected them to be based on the difference in manifold air temperature that we're about to look at.
Okay, ooh, see, that's 173.
173 degrees with no meth injection, no
And then
water
with
meth.
meth injection,
Look at that.
yeah,
Wow.
it's only 86 degrees. So how do you have
So-
an 80 or 90 degree change in charge temperature and not have a big change in power? Because it's better everywhere.
That intake manifold doesn't work with meth injection.
So you think it's a distribution problem?
I think that if you look at what that manifold is doing in there with the plenum and all of those, big log runners going around and everything, there's no way that water is getting from here to there.
We are introducing a percentage of our fuel via the wet manifold flow path.
Right.
And that is affecting the tune, and then that would tend to indicate that the manifold is distributing that methanol to the cylinders because
Not necessarily, because
it's showing in the lambda.
Yeah, but the lambda is picking up 4 tubes, and so what's the difference between the average of 4 tubes versus one of them being radically rich and 3 of them being radically lean?
I mean, it's all conjecture right now, right? Because we
Okay,
don't
well,
have
we
don't
need-
have a definitive answer.
We need
don't.
some means of measuring the air temperature, maybe in a different location of the manifold.
Yeah, what if we got it closer to the port?
I think what we've come up with is we want to move the sensor someplace else to see if we can read an individual cylinder and gather a little bit more information.
That'll give us more information.
Is that
right? I mean,
fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go confuse ourselves even further
Yeah.
by putting the sensor in a different hole.
All I know is that we get to drill and tap a hole and put something somewhere else, so that's all good.
Yes, let's run some plastic through my
Yeah.
engine. All
Let's run
right,
some stuff.
we're down for that. We just spent a complete hour off camera doing a whole bunch of different testing, trying to figure out what was blowing our minds. And here's what it starts with, looking at these two tests. So the red lines show us with the water meth injection and the temperature in the intake manifold going from 68 to 87 degrees. And then we ran it with no charge cooling whatsoever, right? No meth injection. And it went from 106 to 173. But what was baffling us is that the power didn't change that much at all.
Where's all the stuff that's supposed to be in the middle here?
So we're sitting around going, this makes no sense. How can it make the same power with that much difference in air inlet temperature? We ended up putting the temperature sensor all the way back in, I think, number 7 cylinder, and then we also got one in the number 1 cylinder. And we found out essentially the problem here is that when you shoot water and meth through this intake manifold, the distribution is a disaster. Look at this. This is the water meth pull in the original location with the temperature sensor. Then we moved it and put this in number 7.
All the way back.
And this one in number 1. And so what you can see here is that there's a divergence right around 4,500 RPM where all of a sudden there's a gap of 30 degrees between two cylinders. And what that's telling us, and what Steve saw when you looked in the manifold, is that the distribution is a mess. That meth is not providing equal cooling to every hole, which also means that it's not providing equal fueling to every hole.
That's a problem.
Exactly. All of the liquid just gets splashed at the back of the manifold because that manifold is designed for dry flow. And now we're using it as a wet flow piece, and all of that heavy liquid just goes to the back. Those cylinders get nice and heavily fueled, maybe too much fuel.
Right.
And they get more cooling, but up front, hot,
Nada.
dry, and lean.
Yeah.
So it's just a disaster.
Yeah. Is it trash?
Garbage.
Garbage.
Imagine if you had that conversation with a GM engineer that designed that manifold. Hey, we want to run fuel through this thing. What?
Yeah.
Why would you ever do that?
It's not for that.
No, it's not for that.
Does not do droplets well.
If you look at this thing, the interesting thing is it starts out a lot hotter. They both start out the same, and then as this one starts getting happy and my charge temperature starts coming down, this one says, no, you're taking all that stuff from me and I'm getting really hot and I'm unhappy up here.
Right. The average is right down the middle.
Yeah.
This one's taking what this one is losing.
And even if that average was right down the middle, that would still be worse than the numbers that we're seeing right in the plenum, which is what we want it to be.
So, okay, my conclusion from that is water meth injection works to reduce charge temperature.
Yes.
You got to use it on the right intake manifold.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a disaster on your hands if you are a guy who does what everybody does. How many times have you seen this on the street with that intake manifold?
Exactly.
Just plop an injector in a hole and call the thing good. You're going to cause yourself more trouble than you're actually gaining.
So,
although that's not to say there's no value in water meth injection.
It obviously cools the charge temperature.
It obviously cools the charge temperature if handled properly, right?
Right.
Yeah. So do you think, like we were talking about, do you think that the only way to do it is on a manifold like this is to have a direct port water injection system so that all the cylinders will get an even amount?
I say that's an excess amount of complexity. I'll go with the intercooler every time, I think, with that kind of setup.
We don't want to have 27 nozzles going back and forth different ways?
That does lead to, I think, the final conversation of all of the pros and cons now of intercooling versus water meth. I mean, let's just give water meth like a mulligan on this one and say this intake manifold sucks for what we're doing. Water meth could work better than what we established it for.
Yeah.
Right.
But you and I can go talk about, I think, some of the pros and cons of like making power with the intercooler versus water meth.
Oh yeah, and I've got ideas.
Okay.
That's good.
You can change the engine to the next test.
Nice, yay!
That's why we hired him. All right. This is a completely different engine, but this is kind of an explanation about why we're having the trouble with that meth water injection, making it into every cylinder of the engine. So imagine you got your throttle body right here as we do on that other intake manifold, but now we've got a 2-piece fast intake that we're able to take the lid off of. And you can see air goes in here and the water and meth, and pretty much is shooting all the way to the back. See, the cylinders pick up the runners like right over here. This is very similar to what's inside that other LS6 Dorman intake that we're using on that other engine. Just thought I'd give you a quick visual on a different engine as to why this thing is a disaster. All right, Dulcich, I'm going to conclude and you can tell me if you agree.
I'm all ears.
Number one thing I took away from this is do not run water meth or a wet nitrous system through any kind of intake manifold like this that's going to give you distribution problems.
Liquid no bueno.
That is meant to flow dry air. Don't do it. But I would still say we learned enough for me to derive that water meth does work for charge cooling. And if you had the right manifold, right application, it would work and it would be good.
Totally agreed.
But
Oh, not another one.
I don't like having the boost juice that you have to fill up all the time that has to run out.
I'm sure to let it run out.
And the whole thing is gonna be easier to package in the car, cheaper. I think it's got all of those benefits, but I like the intercooler better, because even though it's gotta have a bigger water tank, even though it's gotta have a bigger intercooler, even though it's gotta have more plumbing, even though it still has to have a pump and still has to have wiring, I just think it's the better way to go all the way around, personally.
Well, it's pretty much always working for you. And it's pretty much the same if you had an air-to-air intercooler, which would be on all the time.
Yeah, exactly. That is 100% the key for me. I don't want to be running out of boost juice. Same way I put nitrous on a car and my bottle's always empty, except for in this case, you're gonna blow stuff up if you run out of the juice.
Yeah, but I'm kind of torn because I think in the right application, this may be an advantage from a packaging point of view and ease of installation, stuff like that. You have to have the right kind of intake manifold to make it work correctly.
Yep. So really that comes down to what you want to decide to do for your car. I mean, zillions of guys run the water meth injection all the time and it works great for them and it saves their engines. Me, I'm going intercooler. He's sort of undecided. And that's the type of hard factual information and conclusions that you'll find on every episode of Engine Masters. And if you need even more of that, more behind the scenes, more opinions, more stuff going on with engines and stuff, make sure to follow us on social. On Instagram, we are Engine Masters, and on Facebook, we are Hot Rod Engine Masters. I am David Freiberger on both things. He is Steve Dulcich, and don't forget also Richard Holdner on Instagram, who we thank for stepping in to helping us out, not only running this whole thing today, but also putting together this whole boost package so that we can test this stuff.
And it's good.
It is pretty good, yeah. Actually, I think this needs to find its way into the 67 short bed truck, don't you?
I hope you put it in.
That'd be really good.
Yeah.
And you know what? We do that type of thing on our Roadkill garage though. So check that out on Motor Trend, and we'll see you next time on Engine Masters.
I've got one of those Westec Group hoodies too, and the neck is kind of tight. You know, when you pull it over.
That's right. You're just getting a big head.
Oh, maybe that's what it is.